It's a weird book, right? The biggest thing that makes it hard for us is it's a type of literature that we are just not familiar with. So when we read a story, we expect it to start at the beginning and then to proceed to the middle and end at the end, right? Isn't that how you mostly read stories? Can we get some caffeine in the house? All right, if you ever took a lit class, college, high school, whatever, that's what you learned. You learned Western European 5-act storytelling. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement, or resolution. I don't know why they say denouement when they could just say resolution, but that's what we learned. But when we try to read the book of Revelation this way, we get very confused because Revelation does not follow this structure. It's actually an entirely different structure from that, but it's a common structure back in the day. It's told the same way that most of the prophetic passages in the Old Testament are told, and that's with a cyclical structure. Not sick like, but cyclical like a cycle, as opposed to linear. It's a cycle. The structure is a cycle. We see this a couple different ways. You guys remember Joseph in the Old Testament? You guys did the story last year. We learned about Joseph. Technicolor Dreamcoat Joseph? Ringing any bells? Okay, great. Come on. So Joseph goes to Egypt. He ends up in the prison of Pharaoh. Pharaoh has a terrible dream. Joseph ends up interpreting the dream, right? The dream is Pharaoh sees these 7 fat cows, and then he sees 7 skinny cows. Genesis says the ugliest cows in all the kingdom come up. These 7 skinny cows eat the fat cows, and that's the end of the dream. And then right after that, Pharaoh sees these 7 stalks of grain, and then they're really nice and fat and look like he could make some bread out of that. And then right after that come these 7 skinny stalks of grain that eat the fat ones. You think, how does a grain eat another grain? I have no idea. That's why it's really disturbing. And so Pharaoh says, what does this mean? And Joseph interprets the dream. He says there's going to be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. So you need to use the good to store up for the bad, and that's how it's going to be. And the story goes really well, right? But what it's not is 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, 7 more years of plenty, 7 more years of famine, which is what it would be if we read those straight through, right? It's 2 different pictures of the same event. It's a cycle. We see this again in the book of Daniel. If you ever read Daniel, there's a little bit about lions in there, a little bit about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but most of the book of Daniel is this series of visions about these empires that are going to be coming. The Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, and the Roman Empire. And one vision might talk about one vision might talk about another, a different vision might talk about all 4 together, but it's the same idea repeated again and again and again. Different pictures of the same event. You with me? Okay, so this is what happens in the book of Revelation. It's one event told with different pictures, different scenes. There's 7 scenes in the book of Revelation. The event is God wins. Thus the name of we're really original that way. But the event is that God will eventually triumph. Good will triumph, but there's 7 different pictures that are shown that explain how this happens or depict it in some way. The first one we just finished last week. In the first scene we see Jesus, and he gives these 7 letters to the 7 churches. This week is where it gets weird. So buckle up, because it's going to be a ride.